My eyes followed my supervisor, Miss Serena Caldwell, as she casually deleted what she believed to be utterly meaningless, just a few spreadsheets and meeting notes. 3 months have passed since that moment. The entire department, 23 pairs of eyes, watched as she stood behind my workstation, declared my year of effort worthless garbage, and then hit delete without a moment's hesitation. What she actually erased was the invisible backbone of our entire company. Less than 30 seconds later, my phone vibrated with a $500,000 job offer, and right then, I realized she had just handed me the perfect weapon for the most satisfying destruction I could ever imagine. Before I delve into the sweet sensation of witnessing her panic, would you mind taking a moment to hit that like button and subscribe? Because what I'm about to share will vividly illustrate how a single act of cruelty can backfire in ways that seem impossible until they unfold right before your eyes. And trust me, you need to hear every single detail of how this transpired. Let me take you back to where it all truly began, because revenge stories always germinate long before the actual retribution occurs. 18 months prior, I stepped into Alpha Solutions, taking on the role of Client Relationship Coordinator. The job description sounded bone dry. Maintain communication records, schedule follow-ups, track client satisfaction metrics. What they conveniently omitted was the grim reality that our company was hemorrhaging accounts faster than anyone cared to admit, and my predecessor in this very position had lasted precisely 4 months before quitting without notice. From day one, Miss Serena Caldwell, my direct supervisor, made it crystal clear that she considered my role an unnecessary overhead. She was the quintessential individual who believed business relationships were purely transactional. Send invoices, deliver services, collect payments, repeat. The very notion that clients might desire actual human connection was utterly foreign to her systematic approach to everything. Yet, in those first few weeks, I perceived something different. As I reviewed our client files, I found page after page of dry communication logs that read like robotic conversations. There was no personality, no warmth, no indication whatsoever that anyone at our company had ever bothered to learn anything personal about the individuals sending us thousands of dollars each month. So, I embarked on something that seemed radical in that environment. I began treating our clients like actual human beings. When Mr. Client's Plies, with Mr. Plows, George Harrison, who ran a mid-sized manufacturing company, casually mentioned during a routine check-in call that his golden retriever had just been diagnosed with hip problems, I made a note. 2 weeks later, I followed up, inquiring about the treatment's progress. He was so genuinely surprised that someone remembered. He spent 20 minutes regaling me with tales of his weekend trip to find a specialist veterinarian. When Miss Eleanor Vance celebrated her textile company's 15th anniversary, I sent a personalized message acknowledging the milestone and asking about her plans for growth. She ended up scheduling an additional consultation session that brought in an unexpected $12,000 in revenue. These weren't grand gestures or extravagant gifts. I simply listened when people shared snippets of their lives, remembered what mattered to them, and followed up in ways that demonstrated I genuinely cared about their success beyond merely what they paid us. Serena never comprehended my methods. She would stride past my workstation and observe me typing what appeared to be casual conversation notes, and I could feel her disapproval radiating across the office space. During our monthly reviews, she would flip through my activity reports with visible frustration. "Why are you spending 45 minutes on calls that should take 15?" she would demand, tapping her pen against her clipboard. "Efficiency metrics show you're processing fewer interactions per hour than optimal." I attempted to explain that longer conversations were forging stronger relationships, that clients were specifically requesting to work with me on new projects, that our retention rate had improved by 37% since I started personalizing our approach. But Miss Serena only cared about numbers that fit her spreadsheet formulas. What she failed to realize was that I was constructing something far more valuable than efficient call logs. I was becoming the bridge between our company and the very people who kept us in business. Mr. Arthur Price, who owned a chain of specialty bookstores, started calling me directly whenever he needed anything, bypassing our main number. He told me he appreciated talking to someone who remembered that he was passionate about vintage mystery novels and that his daughter was studying literature at university. Miss Isabella Hayes, whose catering business accounted for our third largest monthly revenue, began recommending our services to other companies, specifically because she enjoyed our conversations about her weekend farmers market visits and her grandmother's recipe collection. Month after month, I watched our client satisfaction scores climb, while Miss Serena remained fixated on efficiency metrics that completely missed the point. She was measuring how quickly we could process interactions, while I was building the loyalty that would determine whether those interactions continued happening at all. The breaking point arrived during our annual strategic planning meeting. Our CEO, Mr. David Miller, was reviewing department performance when he mentioned that client retention had reached an all-time high. He specifically praised our relationship management approach and suggested expanding the personal touch strategy across other departments. I watched Miss Serena's expression shift as the credit for improved retention landed on what she considered my inefficient methods. After the meeting concluded, she cornered me near the supply room. "I don't know what kind of performance theater you're running," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "But this company succeeds on professional excellence, not social hour conversations with clients." She assigned me to complete a comprehensive audit of all client interactions over the past year, demanding detailed documentation of every communication, every follow-up note, every relationship-building effort I had made. It was clearly intended as punishment. Hundreds of hours of bureaucratic busywork that would pull me away from the actual relationship building that was driving our success. But I approached the audit project with the same meticulous attention to personal detail that I brought to client work. I created intricate records showing not just what communications had occurred, but how those communications had translated into business outcomes. I documented the catering referrals that Isabella had generated, the expanded services that Mr. George had purchased after we discussed his company's growth plans, the contract renewal that Mr. Arthur had signed early because he trusted our partnership. The finished audit was 53 pages of irrefutable proof that personal attention to client relationships was directly responsible for over $200,000 in additional revenue. Every casual conversation about weekend plans or family celebrations had strengthened business ties that competitors couldn't replicate with their generic professional approach. I was incredibly proud of that audit. It represented not just a year of work, but a year of genuine connections that had transformed how our company related to the people who trusted us with their business, which made what happened next even more devastating. Miss Serena called an all-hands department meeting on a Tuesday morning in late autumn. She announced that we needed to review our client relationship protocols and that my audit would serve as a case study for discussion. I assumed she was finally ready to acknowledge that personal attention was driving our improved performance. Instead, she directed me to display my audit files on the main conference room screen while the entire department watched. Then she began dissecting every personal note, every conversation detail, every relationship-building effort as evidence of unprofessional boundary violations. "This is exactly the kind of inefficiency that undermines our service standards," she declared, scrolling through months of careful documentation. "Personal chit-chat about pets and hobbies has no place in business communications. These files represent a complete failure to maintain appropriate professional distance." I felt heat spreading across my neck as 23 coworkers watched her tear apart work that had generated significant revenue for our company. She was presenting my greatest professional accomplishment as a cautionary tale about what not to do. But then she did something that crossed a line I never expected her to cross. She pulled up the file containing my complete audit database, every client note, every relationship detail, every conversation record that proved how personal attention was driving our business success. Her finger moved toward the delete option while she continued talking about the need for professional standards. This entire approach is garbage, she announced, her hand hovering over the deletion command. Beginning today, we return to efficient, professional client communication protocols. And then she clicked delete. I watched a year of relationship building disappear from the screen. 53 pages of documented connections that had generated hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue, gone in one vindictive moment. The silence in the conference room was absolute as everyone processed what had just happened. Miss Serena turned away from the screen with a satisfied expression, clearly expecting me to accept this humiliation and start rebuilding my work according to her preferred methods. But she had made one crucial miscalculation. While she was destroying my documentation, she hadn't destroyed the actual relationships I had built. The clients who trusted me, who called me directly, who had shared personal details about their lives and businesses, those connections existed in their hearts and minds, not in our computer files. And apparently, some of those connections had been paying attention to our company dynamics more carefully than anyone realized. My phone started buzzing before Miss Serena had finished explaining her new efficiency protocols. The caller ID showed Apex Consulting, a consulting firm that had recently formed when 3 former colleagues left to start their own company. I stepped out of the conference room to take the call, my hands still shaking from watching my work get deleted in front of everyone. "Eliza," said the voice on the other end, "we've been watching what's happening at Alpha Solutions, and we want to talk." The conversation that followed would change everything. Apex Consulting had been tracking our client retention improvements, and they knew exactly who was responsible for the relationships that kept major accounts happy. They had been planning to approach me for months, but watching Miss Serena destroy my audit files had convinced them that the timing was perfect. "We're prepared to offer you $500,000 annually to join our team," they said, "plus equity participation and complete autonomy over client relationship strategies. We believe personal attention is the future of business consulting, and we want you to build that future with us. $500,000 more than double my current compensation working for people who valued exactly what Miss Serena considered worthless inefficiency. But the most beautiful part of their offer wasn't the money. We know you can't bring proprietary information from Alpha Solutions," they continued. "But we also know that client relationships are built on trust and personal connection, not on database files. If you choose to join us, and if clients choose to work with someone they trust, rather than staying with someone who treats them like transaction numbers, that's simply the natural consequence of different business philosophies." I understood immediately what they were suggesting. They weren't asking me to steal clients or violate any legal agreements. They were simply pointing out that if I left Alpha Solutions and clients decided they preferred working with someone who remembered their dog's health problems and their daughter's college plans, that was their choice to make. When I walked back into the conference room, Miss Serena was still lecturing about professional efficiency standards, while my former coworkers stared at their hands or notebooks, clearly uncomfortable with what they had witnessed. She noticed my return and paused her presentation. "Do you have questions about our new communication protocols?" I looked around the room at people I had worked alongside for 18 months, then at the blank screen where my audit had been displayed before being destroyed, then back at Miss Serena's expectant expression. "Actually," I said, "I have something to announce." What happened next would become the most satisfying moment of my professional life. But I want to save that for the next part of this story, because the revenge that followed was so perfectly orchestrated by Miss Serena herself that you need to hear exactly how her own actions created the domino effect that brought down everything she thought she was protecting. The beauty of what unfolded wasn't that I planned some elaborate scheme to hurt her or the company. The beauty was that by deleting my relationship-building work, she had just eliminated the only thing keeping our biggest clients from walking away. She thought she was deleting inefficient documentation. What she actually deleted was the foundation of customer loyalty that took a year to build and could disappear in a matter of weeks. And when my phone rang with that $500,000 offer, I realized she had just handed me the key to the most elegant revenge possible. Simply letting natural consequences unfold, while she watched everything she thought she controlled slip away forever. "I'm resigning from Alpha Solutions effective immediately," I stated, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. "I'll be joining Apex Consulting as their Director of Client Relations." The conference room went completely silent. You could hear the air conditioning unit humming in the background and someone's pen clicking nervously against their notepad. "Miss?" Serena's expression shifted from smug satisfaction to confusion, then to something that looked almost like panic. "You can't just quit in the middle of a department meeting," she stammered, clearly thrown off by this unexpected development. "There are protocols, notice requirements, transition procedures." "Actually," I replied, pulling out my phone to show the contract offer I had just received. "My employment agreement allows for immediate resignation in cases of hostile work environment or professional misconduct. Having my work deleted in front of colleagues while being publicly humiliated qualifies on both counts." Mr. David Miller, who had been quietly observing from the back of the room, stepped forward. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately before making any hasty decisions." But I was done with private discussions and diplomatic solutions. Miss Serena had chosen to humiliate me publicly, so she would get to experience the consequences just as publicly. "There's nothing to discuss," I said, gathering my personal items from the conference table. "My decision is final. I'll submit formal resignation paperwork within the hour." As I walked toward the conference room exit, I could feel 23 pairs of eyes following my movement. Some of my coworkers looked shocked, others looked impressed, and a few looked like they were reconsidering their own career choices. Miss Serena called after me, her voice higher than usual. "You're making a huge mistake. Apex Consulting is a startup with no proven track record. You're throwing away job security for some fantasy about relationship building being more important than professional standards." I paused at the doorway and turned back to face her. We'll see which approach proves more valuable. Within 24 hours, I had cleaned out my desk, completed exit interviews, and started my new position at Apex Consulting. Their office was smaller than Alpha Solutions, but filled with energy and excitement about building something innovative in the consulting space. More importantly, I was finally working with people who understood that business relationships were built on genuine human connection, not efficiency metrics and standardized communication protocols. But the real validation of my decision came in the weeks that followed, as I watched the natural consequences of Miss Serena's actions unfold with devastating precision. I hadn't reached out to any Alpha Solutions clients. I hadn't made sales calls or sent recruitment messages. I simply updated my professional profiles to reflect my new position and continued being the same person who had spent a year building authentic relationships with people who needed consulting services. The first call came on Thursday morning, 3 days after I started at Apex Consulting. Mr. George Harrison, the manufacturing company owner whose golden retriever I had asked about during routine check-ins, called my new office number directly. "Eliza," he said, "I heard through the professional network that you've moved to a new firm. I wanted to congratulate you and ask about your new company's capabilities." We talked for an hour about his business needs, his expansion plans, and yes, his dog's improved mobility after the specialist treatment. By the end of the conversation, he had scheduled a consultation meeting to discuss transitioning his account to Apex Consulting. The second call came that same afternoon. Miss Eleanor Vance, whose textile company anniversary I had celebrated, wanted to discuss her upcoming project needs with someone who understood her business philosophy. "I've been working with consulting firms for 12 years, she told me, "and you're the first person who ever made me feel like my company mattered beyond the invoice amount. If you're offering the same personal attention at your new firm, I'm interested in making a change." By the end of my first week at Apex Consulting, I had received calls from 6 former Alpha Solutions clients, not because I had solicited them, but because they preferred working with someone who treated them as individuals rather than account numbers. Meanwhile, back at Alpha Solutions, Miss Serena was starting to realize what she had actually deleted when she destroyed my relationship-building documentation. I heard about her growing panic through mutual connections in the professional community. Apparently, she had tried to reach out to major clients for routine check-ins, only to discover that many of them were no longer interested in continuing their contracts. When she called Mr. George Harrison to schedule his quarterly review, he politely informed her that he was exploring other consulting options and would not be renewing his annual agreement. When she contacted Miss Eleanor Vance about upcoming project needs, Miss Eleanor explained that she had found a consulting partner who better understood her business values. One by one, the clients I had spent a year building relationships with were making the choice to work with someone who remembered their personal details, their business challenges, and their individual communication preferences. Miss Serena had believed that client loyalty was tied to Alpha Solutions' brand reputation and service quality. She was discovering that client loyalty was actually tied to the personal connections that made people feel valued and understood. The third week after my departure, I received a call that made everything clear about how devastating Miss Serena's decision had become. Arthur Price, the bookstore owner who had started calling me directly, instead of going through Alpha Solutions' main number, wanted to share some information that he thought I should know. Miss Serena called me yesterday, he said, asking if there were any service issues that might explain why I was considering other consulting options. When I told her I was following you to Apex Consulting because I valued our personal connection, she actually argued with me about it. He laughed, but not in a way that suggested he found it amusing. She told me that professional relationships should be based on service quality, not personal chit-chat about books and family. She said I was making an emotional decision instead of a business decision. Can you believe that? She was lecturing me about how I should choose my own consulting partners. That phone call revealed everything about why Miss Serena's approach was failing so spectacularly. Even when faced with the evidence that personal relationships were driving client decisions, she couldn't adjust her philosophy. She was still trying to convince people that efficiency metrics mattered more than feeling valued and understood. By the end of my first month at Apex Consulting, 14 former Alpha Solutions clients had either switched to our firm or initiated conversations about potential transitions. These weren't small accounts. They represented over 60% of Alpha Solutions' annual revenue. I wasn't actively recruiting them. I was simply being available when they called, remembering details about their lives and businesses, and providing the same personal attention that had built our relationships in the first place. Apex Consulting was thriving beyond their most optimistic projections, while Alpha Solutions was experiencing the worst client retention crisis in company history. The most satisfying part wasn't the money or the professional success, though both were incredible. The most satisfying part was knowing that Miss Serena had created this entire situation herself through her stubborn refusal to value what clients actually wanted. She could have supported my relationship-building approach. She could have learned from the improved retention rates and client satisfaction scores. She could have recognized that personal attention was generating measurable business results. Instead, she had chosen to publicly humiliate me and delete work that represented hundreds of thousands of dollars in client loyalty, apparently believing that her efficiency-focused philosophy was more important than actual evidence of what worked. 2 months after my departure, I heard through professional networks that Mr. David Miller had called an emergency board meeting to address the client retention crisis. Alpha Solutions was facing the possibility of layoffs, reduced operations, and potentially selling to a larger firm to survive the revenue loss. Miss Lee, Dashbady N.R. Serena, who had been so confident about her professional standards and efficiency metrics, was now scrambling to explain how the company had lost most of its major accounts within 8 weeks. According to sources who were still working there, she had initially tried to blame my departure for the client defections, arguing that I had somehow poisoned client relationships or violated ethical standards to steal accounts. But the timeline didn't support her accusations. Clients weren't leaving immediately after I resigned. They were leaving after attempting to maintain relationships with Miss Serena's new efficiency-focused approach and discovering that they preferred working with people who treated them as individuals. The board investigation revealed exactly what I could have told them months earlier. Clients choose consulting partners based on trust, communication quality, and feeling valued, not on how quickly their calls get processed or how efficiently their concerns get categorized. Miss Serena had spent a year dismissing relationship building as inefficient social hour conversation, and now she was facing the consequences of that philosophy in the form of client defections that threatened the entire company's survival. 3 months after my departure, I received the call that made this revenge story complete. Mr. David Miller contacted me personally to discuss what he called a potential partnership opportunity. He wanted to know if Apex Consulting would be interested in acquiring Alpha Solutions' remaining client accounts and possibly hiring some of their staff during what he described as a strategic restructuring process. The company that had considered my relationship-building approach inefficient garbage was now hoping to sell their remaining assets to the firm that had been built on exactly the principles Miss Serena had rejected. During our conversation, Mr. David mentioned that they were also reevaluating leadership approaches in their client relations department. Reading between the lines, it was clear that Miss Serena's position was no longer secure. "I have to ask," he said toward the end of our call, "what would it take to bring you back to Alpha Solutions as Director of Client Relations? We're prepared to offer significant compensation increases and complete autonomy over relationship management strategies." The irony was incredible. 3 months after watching my work get deleted in front of my colleagues, I was being recruited back to implement exactly the same approach at a much higher salary, with complete authority over the department that had rejected my methods. But I had no interest in returning to work for people who had only learned to value my approach after losing millions of dollars in revenue. "I appreciate the offer," I told him, "but I'm very happy with my current position." Apex Consulting understood the value of personal client relationships from day one, rather than having to learn it through crisis. 6 months after leaving Alpha Solutions, I was promoted to senior partner at Apex Consulting, with equity participation and responsibility for expanding our client relationship philosophy across multiple service lines. The clients who had followed me from Alpha Solutions became the foundation for our most successful year in company history. Meanwhile, Alpha Solutions underwent the strategic restructuring that Mr. David had euphemistically described. They laid off 30% of their staff, sold their largest office space, and ultimately merged with a competitor who valued efficiency metrics over personal relationships. Miss Serena was not retained during the merger. I learned about her departure through LinkedIn updates and professional network conversations. According to former colleagues, she had spent her final months at Alpha Solutions trying to rebuild client relationships using the same impersonal approach that had caused the crisis in the first place. She apparently never understood that the problem wasn't her communication skills or technical knowledge. The problem was her fundamental belief that business relationships should be purely transactional. The last update I heard about her situation came from a mutual professional contact who mentioned that she was having difficulty finding comparable positions because her most recent role had ended during a major client retention crisis. Potential employers were understandably concerned about hiring someone whose management approach had contributed to such significant revenue loss, especially in client-facing roles where relationship building was considered essential. I felt no pleasure in hearing about her career difficulties. My satisfaction came from knowing that the principles she had mocked and rejected were now recognized throughout our industry as essential for sustainable business success. Every consulting firm was investing in personal client relationship strategies. Every professional development program emphasized the importance of treating clients as individuals rather than transaction sources. Every successful consulting practice prioritized exactly the approach that Miss Serena had considered inefficient garbage. She had been wrong about what clients valued, wrong about what drove business success, and wrong about the importance of personal connections in professional relationships. And her wrongness had been revealed not through elaborate schemes or calculated attacks, but simply through allowing natural consequences to unfold after she chose to publicly destroy work that represented the foundation of customer loyalty. The most elegant revenge is always the kind where your enemy defeats themselves through their own actions, and you simply have to step aside and let their poor decisions create the destruction they deserve. Today, 2 years after watching my audit files get deleted in front of 23 colleagues, I'm running the client relations division for one of the fastest-growing consulting firms in our region. Our success is built entirely on the principle that Miss Serena rejected, that business relationships thrive when people feel valued, understood, and personally connected to their service providers. Every day, I get to work with clients who appreciate having their birthdays remembered, their family updates acknowledged, and their business challenges addressed with genuine personal investment in their success. And every day I'm reminded that the best revenge against people who undervalue your contributions is simply proving them wrong through your continued success elsewhere. Miss Serena thought she was deleting inefficient documentation when she destroyed my relationship-building work. What she actually deleted was the only thing preventing her professional world from collapsing around her. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge is just letting people experience the natural consequences of their own terrible decisions while you build something better somewhere else. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever had someone undervalue work that you knew was important, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Sometimes the best therapy for professional betrayal is sharing stories with people who understand what it feels like to have your contributions dismissed by people who should know better. And if you enjoyed hearing about how deleting my files became the beginning of Miss Serena's professional downfall, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about workplace revenge that writes itself when you simply let incompetent managers face the consequences of their own poor judgment.